Okay. Dear Heavenly Father, we give thanks we can meet via Zoom. We ask your presence with us. Give thanks for the light that you're opening up. And I pray that this be edifying to your people. And may we draw nearer to you and to know you in a deeper way. We ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
So maybe the title, I was going to give a title for this presentation.
Okay.
Maybe spans equating with dates, something like that, you know. So
How about just spans? Spans and dates. How's that?
yeah, spans and dates would be fine, yes. So I'll just share my first diagram. So this was from a few weeks ago, but I've kind of made it less busy.
Yeah.
Just to show how spans are equating. We have a span and we have a date correlating.
Okay. Can you make it a little bigger?
I can.
Yeah. Oh.
How's that?
Yeah, that's good.
So here we have the first time prophecy of 120 years. And Noah's 480 at this year time. And this is until the flood when he's 600. But I haven't included that. This is kind of simplified. I'm just focusing on the span here and correlating with dates. And we have from this year time prophecy until the kingdom is divided at 977 BC. So Solomon dies and Jeroboam becomes the king of the northern kingdom, and Jeroboam becomes the king of the northern kingdom, and Rehoboam becomes, well, he stays really just, he's king of the Judah and Benjamin. And so it's 1533 years, which ties in with the date of the Exodus. And at this year time period, we have the two golden calves being set up by Jeroboam. And then from the same time prophecy of the 120 years, we have a 977 year span until the Exodus. And following the Exodus, they go into they cross the Red Sea and go into Arabia, and at Mount Sinai, they as Moses goes up into the mount, Aaron then makes a golden calf as well. So that's sort of connecting these year spans and the dates together. And then you also have 1017 years, a span then to the death of Moses, and when they enter the land of Canaan as well, when Joshua takes over, you can equate that to that year as well. And then from that same time prophecy, it's 1493 years until 1017 BC, when Solomon begins to reign. And we have here the 120 for the kings of Israel. So Saul reigns for 40 years, David reigns for 40 years, and then Solomon reigns for 40 years. So you have a 40-year period connected with them wandering in the wilderness from the Exodus to the death of Moses. That comes after the 1533 in there, after the 1533 span, you have a 40-year period there. You can connect with before the end of that span. And then, yeah, so I think it's a very tidy, profound structure.
Yeah, it's very, very tidy. Now, I looked at this, from a mathematical point of view, trying to understand how likely or unlikely this is. Now, the first thing that we have is we have this 510 BC. Now, when, for people who are not familiar with this chronology wasn't created to create these types of spans. So one of the things just of note, 1493 would be the date, or close to Usher's date for the Exodus itself. But we have an extra 40 years in there. And that comes from a number of things. One is a reading of the text of the Bible, and the other is Ellen White's statements regarding these spans of time. And I was very reluctant to add that 40 years to Usher, but I became compelled over time. And then that 1533 BC date became connected to Millerite history. So we had these dates, this chronology, which I was reluctant to really accept. There was lots of different reasons why, which I'm not going to go into. But the thing is, it now creates these coincidences that show a very specific structure that is what I would equate to fine tuning. That is, it would be like the fine tuning argument for the origin of the universe, that if any of these particular laws or rules of the universe were slightly different, we wouldn't have a universe, that the universe wouldn't function. And that's kind of how I look at this. Now, so simply, when you look at 1533 BC, which is the Exodus, the date we have for the Exodus, and 977 BC, which the date we have for the divided kingdom, we can obviously understand that there's a relationship between those two events. What happens, though, is this 2510 BC is just the addition of those two numbers. And so that tends to work out. But when you look at the 1017 BC and the 1493 BC, these things don't seem so obvious that they should just work out that way. But they do, right? And then you have the two periods of 120 years that begin and end this. And you're going to deal with those more as well. And then the 1493 years, of course, are just the product of that 40 years difference between 1017 BC and 977. So you end up having that relationship is sort of a product of that. So, but if the Exodus was in 1544 BC, or 1534 BC, you wouldn't have that happen, right? So you have to have these events occur within this line at the right place. Does that make sense?
Yes. I can see Usher's point with the general understanding is 1 Kings chapter 6, verse 1,
Mm-hmm.
that people are going to think it mentions, I'll just read it here.
Yeah.
And it came to pass in the 480th year, after the children of Israel were come out of the land of Egypt, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel, in the month Sif, which is the 2nd month, that he began to build the house of the Lord. So it has, from the building of the house of the Lord, the temple of Solomon, that date then is 480 years to when they came out of the land of Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
And my understanding initially was this is going to be the Exodus.
Mhm.
But as you say, there's Ellen White statements, and there's even when we look at the Sabbath, in if we're going to apply that,
The
it's in
biblical
Exodus.
calendar, yeah. So if you're going to have the biblical calendar line up with the Sabbath references, both in the Spirit of Prophecy and the Bible during the Exodus period, they wouldn't line up in 1493 BC.
Yeah, so it wouldn't be a Sabbath. It's the 15th day of the second month. We find that in Exodus chapter 16, verse 1. So it's beginning the promise that the manna is going to fall the next day for 6 days. So that their day, the 15th day of the second month, has to be a Sabbath. But the Bible itself compounds coming out of Egypt with this here like a period of time. In Psalm 114, so Psalm 114 says, when Israel went out of Egypt, the house of Jacob, from a people of a strange language, Judah was his sanctuary, and Israel his dominion. The sea saw it and fled, so that's the Red Sea. And then it says Jordan was driven back. So it's connecting the Red Sea and Jordan to this here Israel coming out of Egypt.
Yeah, and even the Hebrew language itself, the way that it talks about it, it's more about a process. It's the coming out of the land of Egypt that is completed when they enter the promised land. But it begins when they come out of Egypt. And I can't remember exactly when you look at the King James, it's not quite as clear, but in the Hebrew, it's a little clearer, the language that's being used. So people just made that assumption, and I made that assumption. But part of the reason you brought up dealing with the Sabbath, because as I started to work on the chronology precisely, I found that I couldn't get either 1492 or 1493 to work out with the Sabbath being on the 15th day of the second month. And both of those dates are the two different dates that people have. Now, and even the other one, 1446, which is completely wrong. That's the modern date that they have based upon Theo's chronology. Again, it doesn't work. So the only one that worked, and I was actually struggling between 1532 and 1533, because for me, 1532 was the 480th year would be 1013 BC, the fourth year of Solomon's reign. But as I looked at it, I realized I couldn't get it to work in 1532, but it did work in 1533. And so when he says the 480th year, that's actually referring to when they enter into the promised land. So it's a little bit tricky there. But I'm going back. So it's basically 520 years to the Exodus, not 480. But a lot of people are familiar with these little fine details. But the thing that's interesting is that we worked through these fine details first before we noticed any of these spans. So we had reasons why we chose these different dates. And you and I struggled with it somewhat together here and there, different points. But once we had this, we now have this structure, which we wouldn't have had if it was 1532 BC, for instance.
Yes. Okay. Can we move on to the next one?
Yeah.
Okay, so with this one here, I'm just picking up on the golden calves again. And we've seen here from 1533 to 977 BC. It's a period of 556 years. And the language is very similar. In Exodus 32, verse 4, thy gods, O Israel, which brought thee out of the land of Egypt. This is Aaron. And Jeroboam in 1 Kings chapter 12, verse 28, says the same thing. And here we have false worship being built with 2 golden calves. And then we have the span, the kings of Judah. And then we have, in a sense, true worship being destroyed with the temple destructions in 586 BC by Nebuchadnezzar. And then that's 655 years later. We come to the destruction by Rome in 70 AD. And they're both falling on the 10th day of the 5th month. And we see that this year, 655 is like a mirror of this year, 556. So I just think that's was just a noteworthy observation, like a structure. There isn't a date associated with here now 977 BC, and that is the 15th day of the 8th month. So the calves were probably built or made before that, but this year feast day was selected. And actually, so that was the 15th day of the 8th month. And the chronology I did had Moses coming down from the mountain. It was based on an Elmite quote, and it was just like of about 50 days from when they cross the Red Sea until they arrive at Mount Sinai. And I just done a little chronology on that one time. And so Moses came down on the mountain and smashed the 2 tables of the 10 Commandments. And I have that on the 16th day of August in 533 BC. But it could well be that the day before, it wasn't, I don't think a calf was made that particular day.
Yeah.
And so as the day before would have been the 15th of August. So in a sense, there's a potential then for that could be the 15th day of the 8th month, in a sense. But obviously in the Julian calendar, well, this would be the 15th day of the 8th month. In the biblical calendar, but it wasn't. This is a wee bit of I can't really prove it. It was just my best guess, so I didn't include it in this here diagram.
Yeah.
But
it is interesting how these particular dates, these particular structures show up. Because it's just not something that you would expect, especially when we have them repeated again and again. And the other thing that's really nice about this is what it's connecting is these 2 statements, right? And then here you have these 2 dates that connect it, right? So the connections are pretty obvious. It's not something arbitrary.
Yes. Okay, any comments before we move on to the next one?
Yeah, because if anybody has questions or comments, feel free to do so.
To the next slide. So this here again is going back to the spans and dates But we have another set of dates and spans connecting. So I'm going to try and make this a bit bigger. And, is that big enough?
Yeah, that's good.
So again, we have this year 120-year period being brought to view. This is the first time prophecy in the Bible. We find it in Genesis 6, verse 3. And it takes us to the flood and 2390 BC. And so the previous connections, the 1533 years and the 977 years, were from this year date. But this year connection, the periods here in this year diagram connect to the flood. We have from the flood 457 years until the affliction of 400 years that's prophesied in Genesis 15, verse 13. And I have it in this here verse here, up above. It says, and he said unto Abraham, know for surety that thy seed shall be a stranger that is not theirs, in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. So I think a lot of people read this here and think this is applying to Israel being 400 years in Egypt. And that's not the case. We know that this is connected with a prophecy of 430 years. And so it's a sort of covers, like this would be a portion of that there, 430 years. And that 430 years is divided into two periods of 215 years. And so it's really from them 215 years that the last period of 215 years until the Exodus, that is really where they begin the affliction. And it's only after Joseph dies and a king comes, a pharaoh emerges who does not know Joseph. And so of that 215 years, there's another, I think it's 56 years that Joseph lives, and he dies when he's 110. And then it's a period of 144 years from then to the Exodus, which is quite an interesting. So that 144 years really marks the period of time when the Israelites would begin to be afflicted by the Egyptians. And so this year, this is 457 years, takes us to 1933 BC. And this is when Abraham is 105 years old, is when the prophecy begins. And it's concerning the weaning of Isaac. And he's mocked by his half-brother, Ishmael. And then Ishmael is sent away. And that there marks the beginning of the affliction of the seed of Abraham. That here is going to be afflicted. And then from that date, the flood, it's 1933 years until 457 BC. And the decree of Artaxerxes, when that there is put into effect in the autumn of 457 BC, and that begins a period of 2,300 years until 1844. And here we have the end of biblical prophetic time, and Christ enters the most holy. Early writings, page 243. Prophetic time closed in 1844, and Jesus entered the most holy place to cleanse the sanctuary at the end of the days. So here we have the end of prophetic time, and going back to this year period, this is the first biblical time prophecy. And if you take away 2510 BC, if you just do the math, 2510 minus 1844, it gives you the number 666. So the first time prophecy to the end of time prophecy has this here figure, and the first period of 120 years, if you multiply that by this last period here of 2,300 years, it gives us the number 276,000, 276,000 basically. And we find the number 276 in Acts chapter 27, verse 37. And we were in all in the ship 260 souls. So I just thought that was just maybe worth including. So maybe any comments on this here chart?
Well, the only thing about this is that 1933 years from the end of the first time prophecy to the beginning of the last time prophecy, if we want to put it that way, or the major time prophecy.
Yeah.
You know, it creates this mirror. And the thing that you know, that we have in connection with this is, of course, the flood is connected symbolically to the shut door that happens in 1844. One is it's October 22nd that the door of the ark closes, and it's October 22nd that the door of the ark closes on the 10th day of the 7th month in both time periods, different, one's Julian, one's Gregorian. But this 120 years becomes this powerful symbol that connects, as you're going to see later on, with these other time periods. So the 120 years being connected as the first time prophecy is connected to these. There's a logical connection between these, even if we didn't have the span of time that creates that 1933 and the 457 matching each other. And again, that's just one of those things that it works out that way, not by chance. It wouldn't be by chance. It would show fine-tuning. And then how do you account for the 666? Why is that symbol connected with that?
I just did the math. I didn't. I didn't ask why, but it just sort of, it just seems significant. So obviously we connect it with the man of sin.
Yeah.
And
they're dealing with sin with the flood. It's dealing with the prophecy addressing the sin, right? Because that's why the world's going to be destroyed by a flood. And so that's a judgment. And then again, Christ entering in the most holy place. This is the judgment. And the issue that's going to decide in the judgment ultimately, or decide the peoples at the end of the world, is 666. So it becomes a symbol for the Sunday law, which is going to happen after 1844.
yes. And what do you think of them? The 276, normally we connect that to, you have in the ship 273 sort of Romans and other people other than Paul, Aristarchus, and Luke.
Right, so you have priests and Levites.
Yes, so we normally connect that number 273 with the Levites, what we find in Numbers chapter 3. And the 3 then we connect with the priests. And so we know they do the work of in the sanctuary, which is at the end of this year time period being cleansed. And 120 is normally a number we connect with the priests as well. you had 120 years, 120 days, and then 70 days connected with 457 BC. That took you, so it was 120 days, took you to the midnight cry, in a sense, the first day of the 5th month.
Okay. Yeah, so these are the separation of these classes. Right. Is that how you would look at these symbols, why they show up? You know, you have a number for those that receive the mark of the beast, and the number for those that the priests and Levites, which are going to be saved.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Now, just a little mathematical oddity has to do with the relationship between 273 and 666. Now, so if you add 666 to 273, you get 939. And if you subtract 666, or subtract 273 from 666, you get 393. So 666 creates this odd inversion of numbers with 273.
But what's
So it creates a mirror. Well, it's nothing. It's just the opposite of 939, right? So you have 939 and 393. So 666 does this. Now, when you add 939 and 393 together, you get 1332, which is 666 times 2. But I think that's kind of a natural result of doing the math before that, because we're adding it and we're subtracting it to these numbers. So in a sense, we're just adding 666 to 666. But you know, so there's this strange relationship though between these two numbers, which is a mirror of two opposite groups. That's my point on that. So this is pretty interesting as well. We have some of the same patterns showing up with different dates. Anybody comment on this? I mean, these are pretty clear things. They're not really mysterious, but some people might have questions.
Okay, we'll move on to the next one.
Yep.
Okay, this deals with more spans and dates connecting, but this is connecting two different, another time period, like the week of Christ, sort of connects with this. So Abraham, he's 75 and he leaves Haran. And this is in 1963 BC. I had said that the Exodus is in 1533, so this is 430 years prior to the Exodus, and this is the time prophecy of 430 years that we find in Galatians chapter 3, I think, and it's also in Exodus.
Yeah, and it's in Exodus as well. I don't know if I would call it necessarily a time prophecy as much as just the span of time that's referred to, because the time prophecies there are the 400 years and the 4 generations, in a sense, are time prophecies. But it is definitely noted in Exodus, the 430 years, and in Galatians.
So you don't consider it a prophecy, you just consider it a span?
Well, because there isn't a specific prophecy mentioned beforehand, but it is implied. So the 400 years is, in a sense, implying a 430-year time prophecy, because because it's going to be 30 years from when he left Haran that the 400 years begins. So it is the time prophecy in a sense. I'm just saying that somebody may look at it and say, well, where's the 430-year time prophecy given? So it's not a predictive date that's explicitly stated. And that's one of the points of why I'm making it, is that often people will dismiss something because they say, well, where is the time prophecy given that we should recognize this period of time? And yet we all recognize the 430 years, even though it's not specifically a time prophecy in the strictest sense. So it's one of those things that I bring up as an argument against the idea that we shouldn't just look at a span of time as a prophecy in just because it happened, even if the Bible mentions it, right?
Mhm.
So I would argue that, it is a time prophecy in a certain sense, but not in the sense that we normally think of it.
Yeah, the 400 years would be a more prominent prophecy.
Yeah.
And I forgot to mention that there's the second time prophecy in the Bible brought to view that you see. So that last chart does the first two. So that's another aspect of, I think it's significant.
Another interesting point then about that is we have the 2300 days and the 2520 end together. And people will accept the 2300 days. But since the 2520 isn't explicitly mentioned as 2520 years in the Bible somewhere, or some time prophecy that they can clearly define, they would dismiss that one. But you would have to use the same argument for the 430 years. Even though it's mentioned in the Bible, it's not mentioned as a time prophecy as such. It's just mentioned as a span of time. But they both end together with the Exodus. So, yeah. So anyway, now you're going to be connecting these different periods. You're going to leave this chart because you didn't really explain it.
No, I just pressed something and it just disappeared.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, so from this here, choosing, in a sense, Abraham's being called out of Babylon, in a sense, prophetically. He's told to leave Haran, and then it's 1989 years to 27 AD, where we have the baptism of Jesus, and then it's 1993 years until the cross in 31 AD, and then 1996 years until 34 AD, when we have the stoning of Stephen. And then from each of these here dates, inclusive reckoning, so you're counting, for instance, 27 AD as 1 to the second year, 28 AD, so forth. It's 1963 years, which is the date that Abraham leaves Haran. That will take you to 1989, and so forth. You do the same date, 1963 to 1993, and 34 AD, it's 1963 years to 1996. And so this is like the first week, prophetically speaking, the first 7 years of the movement from 1989 to 1996. And in each of these here years, we have marked something significant in the movement. First of all, we noted 1989 is the time of the end that's brought to view in Daniel 11:40, part B. And then in 1993, it was the year that Prophetic Timelines was published by Jeff. So you had a line upon line study that lined it up. The previous histories were to shed light to the movement at the end of the world. All these histories combined, the effect of every vision. And then in 1996 was the publishment of articles in Our Firm Foundation magazine by Jeff again, which was later collated and published as The Time of the End magazine. So I thought this was quite sort of connecting this here, Abraham to the wake of Christ, to the beginning of this here movement. So any comments?
So Stephen, can you talk about how you found all these spans? Were you just going through every span you could find, or how'd you get to this?
Just got the calculator and just sort of wondered.
So you looked at that 1963. So you looked at 1963 BC, and then you thought, how can I connect that year, date, with a span of time? Is that what you thought?
I don't know. I just kind of being a nerd.
Yeah, I know.
Got the calculator out and just sort of maybe just a wee thought came into my head. How long is that? You know, and I just found, oh, that's 1989, and then I just checked this here. I checked it out a wee bit more, and yeah, I wasn't maybe spending hours on the computer, or it just sort of came across, but maybe just a thought came into my mind, and I wasn't really qualifying these things.
Yeah.
You know, I just sort of think about them things anyway. You know, it's kind of just interests me. You know, so I wasn't really going out of my way to try and.
But again, you have a date that can be related to a span of time. So that idea, where did we first get that a date could be a span of time? Can you remember where we first used that idea? Remember when you first used it?
Well, is it 70 AD?
Well, so we could take the 70 years captivity as a symbol, and then we could see 70 AD is a date. So I would think that's the first place.
You don't think that's the first place?
I said I think that is the first place that I can think of.
Oh,
So it's something that's very basic, even before this movement. Before,
yes.
Most Adventists, conservative Adventists at least, would see 70 AD as a symbol of connected with the 70 weeks as a symbol for the close of probation and the 70 years captivity. So they would say the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD is symbolic, but it's just simply a date connected to spans of time in the kingdom. So it's not something that we created. It's something that's existed before this movement. I would have been doing this in the 1980s. So
I think Iran was going to say something.
okay.
I was just saying one of the earlier ones I remember is 1533 being a date and a span.
Yeah, but that's much later because we already had it with 107 days and being 10th day of the 7th month. But yeah, definitely when we were using it in this movement, we already had a precedent that existed before this movement existed, is my main point. But yeah, we started using it in this movement. And 1533 is one of them, where 1533 BC becomes 1533 days. But Stephen's also used it as 1533 years.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so next slide.
And just one other thing too is William Miller had used 666 as a number and used it as a span of time. So that's not really a date, but that's just a number that would typically be unrelated to a span of time. The mark of the beast. And so it says it's the number of a man, but he addressed it as a span of time.
And we've seen that there's 3 of those periods of 666 years connected between Babylon and Rome, and then Rome and the papacy.
Okay, for this one here, we're still using the date of 1963 BC, and then in Genesis 16 verse 16 it says, "And Abraham was 86 years old when Hagar bare Ishmael to Abraham." So this is really the next time period after 1963 BC that we can identify. And it's just 11 years after Abram left Haran and arrived in the Promised Land. He went down to Egypt, I think, as well for a while and came back out. So it's 11 years or so after that. You could even mark the time when he was 85 as maybe when he Ishmael was conceived, but we don't, but still could be within the same year. We don't know exactly, but this is the date that the Bible gives us. And then I found out it was 3,915 inclusive years. So that's including 1963 BC in this year count as one, to 1952. And we've seen there it's 1952 BC that Ishmael is born. So this is like I'm not noticing anything actually happening prophetically in 1952 as yet. There's nothing obvious. I haven't really searched out much has anything has happened, but as a symbol, it connects this year 3915 to Ishmael to 1952 BC.
Mhm.
And we know that Ishmael is considered the father of Islam or the Arabs, as well as Abraham. And we know that Revelation 9:15 is concerning a prophecy of 391 years and half a month, or 0.5 of a month, that we connect with Islam from 1449 to 1844. And Ellen White says that was a fulfillment of prophecy. And then you can also, I just sort of added it in, and I'm not noticing any, I just also worked, that you can go from 3,915 years in inclusively again to 1963, which then connects with 1963 BC here. So just to make a nice 11 years each side, just has a bit of a structure to it. So we had already noticed that the kings of Judah has a 381 year period, and I'll bring that to view in the next slide if there's no other further questions on this.
So just a question here. So if you take, because we should be able to connect this to our history as well. At least that's the way that I look at it.
Mm-hmm.
So now 1952 and 1963, there are things that we could connect to those years that we have already connected to our lines. But if we look at the span of time from, let's say we went from 1952 to our time, that would be 70 years to 2022, right?
Yes.
So I'm not sure how you would connect to these events, but there must be some way of connecting them.
Why aren't you looking at it chiastically?
Well, there is a chiastic structure here. So we got these 11 years and 11 years. The question is, what events in 1952 and 1963 would we address?
No, okay. My point may be not clear.
Okay,
Abram leaves Haran at age 75. He's leaving behind an idolatrous homeland, right?
yeah,
1952, the Adventist Church begins its desire to become part of the World Council of Churches. By 1955, they're in the conversation to create questions on doctrine. By 1957, it's published.
mhm.
So could it be said that Abram leaving idolatry then chiastically comes to this in 1952, where the Adventist Church begins to accept the idolatry of apostate Protestantism?
Okay. Yeah, and then what's 1963?
Well, here again, you've got, if you've got as Stephen is showing, you have 3,915 years where Abram is 86 when Ishmael is born.
Mhm.
So instead of walking by faith, he walked within his own power.
Mhm.
So 1963, the beginning of where the church was walking by its own power. In other words, in rejecting fully righteousness by faith and choosing to say, this is what we are doing for God.
Okay. Now, maybe we could even look at some period, like when he leaves Haran, how long is it till Genesis 15? I mean, we don't have a way of nailing that down, but I would put that as something that spans in between, that in a sense a reverse occurs during those the 11 years. It would represent that chiastically.
Okay, but
Put 1957 in there. Questions on doctrine. It's 5 years, and I believe it's understood as 5 years between when he leaves Haran to. Wait, I'm trying to remember. Maybe I'm getting that wrong.
I don't think you're getting it wrong.
I think that's
Well, you're
right.
thinking from Ur
No.
to Haran.
Well, no, there is 5 years from Ur to Haran. I'm just trying to remember the guess that people have, because I don't think we can nail down Genesis 15. But I think some people put it as, because at that time he wants Eliezer to be his heir, right? So it's before Ishmael's born. We know that.
Well, the other part that I'm looking at from when I first saw this chart, Abram was 99 when the 3 visitors came to him, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
that's going to be quite a bit later. That's going to be.
It's 24 years later.
Yeah.
But 24 years after 1952 would put us in that'd only be 76. I was wrong there. I was
Yeah.
looking whether it was 96.
Well, yeah, I would put it 24 years before 1952. So I would put it the other way as a mirror. But anyway, I'm just saying that this probably is not completed. Yeah, I mean, the simple way that a person could look at this is they could take these 2 dates, Abraham leaving Haran and Abraham being 86, and you just add them together, they become 391 or 3,915 years if you add those 2 years. But there's also significance in this symbol of 11, and but I still think that we can connect this chart to our time. It's just the question is, how would we do that? What symbols would we use? So
if you could just take 52 as a symbol,
yeah,
times 360, you again have the 18,720.
yeah.
You know, I don't know, because we do
What about,
that.
what about 63 times 36?
Yeah, that's 22,680.
Yeah.
Doesn't really.
Well, that's 252 more than 2520. Or less than 2520, I mean. So if you multiply 63 times 36 and add 252, you get 2520.
It's 22,680. So what do you mean?
No, I'm just multiplying 63 times 36.
All right, okay.
63 times 36 equals 2268 plus 252 is 2520.
All right, okay.
And that means it's actually 9 times 252,
Mm-hmm.
right? Is 2268. So I'm just saying that, you know, the symbols there with the 63, if you're going to multiply it by 36, not by 360,
Mm-hmm.
just by 36.
Yeah, and I had the idea of trying to align, because we had connected this here, 1963. There's a span of 1989 years to 2780. And I thought, well, what happens if I line that up with 1989? And then, so 11 years would take you then to 2000. But I'm thinking if this was 1989, it was November the 9th of November.
Yeah.
And here we have the 11th of September. So it's like 9/11, and here we have, so that would be 11 years and 306 days. So that would kind of line almost, you know, even though it would be like, as you look at it, if you don't have the actual sort of the data, you maybe look at it, we've looked at it before as 12 years.
Yeah.
But it's just under 12 years.
Yeah.
And then you basically, Ishmael would be, or sorry, Isaac would be born then in 2014. And then the 30 years when
2014 AM.
no,
What do you say?
so 1989 is 1963.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah. So this, I'm trying to line this here up with 9/11. And then you'd have to have an inclusive count of 13 years to 2013 when the visitors come to Abraham and promise Isaac, and then Isaac's born in 2014. And then the weaning of
2014 of what? Because you're counting the other direction.
Yes. I've actually done a diagram. I can maybe bring it up
Okay.
later.
Yeah, I'd have to see that. That's
Yeah.
hard to do. Okay.
I didn't bring it up because it's just an idea I had. I don't know whether it worked, but
Okay.
I can let you have a look at it anyway.
Well, I have some ideas about this, connecting it with art history, but it's the way that I do things. So it's
Okay.
actually being more specific, multiplying numbers and taking them as days and then turning them into spans of time. So,
So to relate that chart to the 2520, it has a 151. So if you take the whole time span from the beginning to the end, it's divisible by 151 and 26.
explain, just adding the 11 years to the 39, so it's
Yeah,
3926.
from the 1963 to 1963,
Yeah.
it's 151 times 26, or 3926 altogether.
Yeah, so 151 times 26 is 3926. So that
And-
becomes a symbol. Yeah.
Yeah, the 151 is part of the 2520.
And what's the 26 though? Does it mean?
I'm not sure, but we've seen 26 on a lot of different things, I think.
Yeah, I know. Okay,
Okay, thanks.
interesting idea.
Okay, this is quite similar, except we've lined it up with the 391 and a half years from the division of the kingdom in 977 BC to the destruction of Jerusalem in 586. And so we've lined that up with the 3,915 years from when Abram leaves Haran to 1952. So again, this is like a symbol of Ishmael being born.
Just
And
going,
connect that.
Stephen, sorry to interrupt you, but if you take the 26 and you connect it to 1963, so for instance, 3926 is just 2 times 1963. If you go back to that previous chart, and the interesting thing. Yeah, I mean, you can leave it on this chart. Yeah, you can leave it on this chart. I'm just saying, just talking about the other chart, but it's here too. But if I take 1963 and I double it, it's the number of span of years of 3926. Now, 3926 is 151 divided by 26. The symbol of 26 is February 6th, and I was born February 6, 1963. So again, it connects to my birthday.
And I remembered another one, 1 year and 26 days is 391.
That's the other one. 1 year and 26 days is 391, correct. I knew we ran into it somewhere. So that connects us to the 391 again.
Yes, interesting.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so this is lined up the 391 years and a half. We've lined it up, and from 586 BC, there's 49 years then until Cyrus succeeds to the throne in 537, and the captives then begin to return from Babylon in the following year. So the actual decree doesn't end there, but the 70 years ends in this year date. And then I just applied the 49 years to this year, 1952, which connects with Ishmael and Islam. And it's 49 years then would take you to 2001, where we noted Islam being restrained after the attacks on 9/11.
Yeah, so this connects us to our history.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, we should be connected to our history.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you have 2 metonic cycles there.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's any significance with that.
Yeah.
So you have here, we've normally connected Babylon has fallen. The Revelation chapter 18 verses 1 to 3. Ellen White connects that to the towers, the great buildings of New York City falling down. And we have the beginning of this year, Abraham leaving Haran, in a sense, coming out of Babylon prophetically. And then with Cyrus's, when he comes to the throne, then it's Babylon has fallen just 2 years prior to that, and then he issues a decree that enables people to leave Babylon and return to the Promised Land. So there's a wee bit of a connection there with the events in these here. They're sort of related to coming out of Babylon. I don't know if you could connect that with the division of the kingdom, but move on to the next chart.
No, just a couple of things here. So just dealing with this connection between 1963 and September 11th, 2001. Remember I said my birthday's February 6th, 1963. And it's 217 days from my birthday to September 11th. So that's a symbol of midnight, July 21st. And then it's 38 years from September 11th, 1963, which is 2 Metonic cycles to the restraint of Islam in 2001. So.
Yes, and that Metonic cycles, it's 6667 plus 273 days.
Yeah.
Isn't that right?
Yeah.
So that's that doubled. Okay. Okay, move on to the next.
And 6667 is 666 with a 7 at the end. And was there something else you noticed about 6667 before?
Yeah.
Because it's 18. It's 18. 6 plus 6 plus 6 is 18. So that's the July 18th.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. That was
and it's a reverse of 7776.
Right.
Which is 54, which is a symbol of the 5th day of the 4th month, times 144. Gives you 7776.
Okay.
And you can connect them 3 sevens together to give you number 221.
Yeah.
216. And the advertisement for July 18, JS advertisement was in the newspaper on the 21st of June.
Yeah.
And
no,
then,
and then yeah. So I mean, it does become a little bit, nerdy, if to use your word there. When we look at this, the 38 is also the 38 years in the desert from the failure of the 12 spies to when they actually enter the promised land. So 38 years is also John 5:5. So 38 becomes a symbol, and we've used it already in connection with the Metonic cycle, that there's 38 Metonic cycles from, it was from July 27th, the 26th day of the 4th month in 1299 to the 26th day of the 4th month in 2021. So it's 38 Metonic cycles. And it's 76 Metonic, or 76 years that we have from Hiroshima, which is August 6th to August 6th, 2021. So that's 4 Metonic cycles, 4 times 19. So the Metonic cycle becomes an important symbol. So the fact, though, that you can take that 38 years and those 11 years and create these 49 years that parallel a different structure, that is, the division of the kingdom is connected with this destruction of Jerusalem, right, and the restoration. But the one with the line of Abraham is dealing with Ishmael. So the fact that, so it's thematically connected. It's not just picking arbitrary events and making them connected. These aren't arbitrary events. These are things that are already thematically connected. Okay, thanks.
Okay, next one.
Yeah.
So Ishmael being born in 1952, I noticed that it was 2021 years to 70 AD and the destruction of Jerusalem. And then from then it's 1952 years inclusive reckoning to 2021. And
Now, when you do this, when you're counting 2021, you're not counting it the way that you were in the other ones. That is, you're not doing that inclusively. If you had done it inclusively, it'd be 2022, right? Yeah, because you're just you're not adding them. Before, when you were doing BC and AD dates, you're just adding them together. You're including all of the first year and all of the BC date and all of the AD dates, right? The whole year. From the beginning of 1952 BC to the end of 70 AD is 2022 years. And then you would actually count 1952 years from 70 AD to 2022, right? So that would be a cardinal count. But so the point is, you could do it either way. You could have it end on 2022, or you could have it end on 2021, depending on how you count. I'm just pointing that out.
okay.
Hopefully everybody follows that.
Well, 1952 plus 2021 years takes you to AD 70.
Yep.
No, that's right, isn't it? And then from AD 70, it's inclusive reckoning.
Yeah, you did it inclusive, but and my point is I mean, I mean, just that we can count it different ways. That's all I'm trying to say. Now, the significance of 2021 is that we have the symbol for the destruction of Jerusalem, which is August 6th, that Jerusalem is destroyed. It's on the 10th day of the 5th month. But August 6th in 2021 is going to be the 26th day of the 4th month. And those were the two symbols, the 10th day of the 5th month and the 26th day of the 4th month, that we tie together. Now, Hiroshima was the August 6th as well, and it was the 26th day of the 4th month. So I would just combine these two with the way that I did it. So I have no problem with doing it like this. I'm just saying that there's different ways you can do it, and somebody looking at it could say, well, you could produce 2022 if you did it a different way. But I like the 2021 date. It's fine.
I just thought it was kind of more urgent.
Yeah.
Feel about it, more urgent feel about it,
Yeah, and
But
plus we
yeah.
have all these events in 2021. But for somebody looking at it and trying to figure out how you're doing this, that sometimes you're counting inclusively and sometimes you're counting cardinally. Sometimes, so there's just different ways of counting that can, and so the point is, are we consistent in how we do this? Why do we choose this number? Well, one is you're counting from 1952 BC to 70 AD. And you have two choices. You could count it as 2021 years or 2022 years.
I think it would be
2021 years is the actual
2020
number.
or 2021, right?
2022 or 2021.
Because 2021 minus 70 is 2020. I mean,
Yeah, but remember they're going
1951.
Remember we're going from BC to AD.
The 70 AD is 80. So I was just subtracting 70 from that, and you would get 1951.
Is this from like spring, spring to spring or fall to fall?
Okay, so yeah, so what he's doing, if you count it as 2021 years, if you count it from January 1st, 1952 BC, it would be 2021 years to January 1st, 70 AD, right? So that would be normally how we would count it. If we're just counting cardinally how many years it is. If you would do it inclusively, you would simply add 70 AD to 1952. And if you did that, then you would have 2022 years. And that's sort of how Miller did it. He didn't take into account there's no 0 year. Now, Mark raised his hand for some reason. Mark, did you have a question? Or was that accidental? It was accidental. Okay. So, so it wouldn't be 2020 years. That would be excluding 70 AD and excluding 1952. That would be an exclusive count. You could get 2020. Does that make sense, Iran?
Yeah, if you're just looking to use that 1952, yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you could still use 1952 and count it as 2022 years, but you would just end up in 2022 because notice his 1952 years is an inclusive count. That is, he's not counting cardinally, because if you added 1952 to 70, you would get 2022. So if you just added, so 2021 is the 1952nd year from the destruction of Jerusalem, right? So normally we'd count that 951 years. I know this gets really confusing. Some people their brains just shut down when you start dealing with how to count, because we should have learned how to count at, in elementary school or maybe even play school or kindergarten. But, we can count inclusively or ordinally or cardinally and exclusively. And all these different ways of counting can produce different ways of different numbers. And so that confuses people. But I like this 2021 chart just fine.
So we have time for another one anyway.
Yeah. And the thing is, we already connected AD 70 to 2021. So the August 6th is already connected. What time is it? Yeah, you got time for another one. So this was your 7th chart. So the next one is your 8th chart.
Yes. Well, the next one I was going to go into the chronology. What I'll do is I'll show you
the chart itself.
The diagram that I've done with lining up the 1989 with.
Which chart is this then?
Oh, that's not it. I'm trying to find it. Okay, can you see that? No?
I don't see anything, no.
All right, okay, hold on to share.
So it's not a chart you sent us then?
No, I wasn't happy with it, but
okay. So maybe we can just look at it, and we can look at it, and then we can look at it again next week when you do the rest of these charts.
This one here.
Okay. Yeah, so this relates to what you were doing earlier.
Yes. So we have the timeline lined up with 1963, because we've seen that 1989 years connected to 27 AD. And so I just thought, what happens if I line it up? I was trying to make, well, kind of.
Excuse me, please.
Yeah, Mark?
I am saying,
yeah, I heard that, Mark. So what's your question?
Saying, excuse me, please. So being rude right now. I see yours on there with he teaching your birthday, not mine.
Oh, you want your birthday in there?
Yes.
Okay, well, I'm working on that. I'm going to show you your birthday
Uh,
tonight.
I want this guy. Do mine.
You want Stephen to do your birthday? So October 31st,
Yes.
October 31st, 1984.
Yes. Yes. In this moment, I want to see what is going on.
Yeah. So we know October 31st is an important date because that is the 95 thesis that Martin Luther nailed to the door at Wittenberg in, I think it's 1517, if I remember correctly. So that's an important date as well, and it connects to our history. So anyway, Stephen, just briefly, what's going on here? So
Okay, timeline from November the 9th of November to 9/11 in 2001. It's 11 years, 306 days. So you have 11 years from when Abraham leaves Haran to Ishmael being born. A wee bit squishy, maybe Jeff would say. That's kind of, you're looking at it there. Oh, you look at 1989 to 2001. We've normally connected that to being 12 years. And then to go back online again, 13 years in to the promise of Isaac and Abraham being 99. You have to maybe have an inclusive 13 years to 2013. And then it's 1 year until Isaac's born. That lines up with 2014. And then Abraham being 105. And the 5 years from 2014 then line up with 2009. That lines up with 2019. So I don't know if you could parallel these. I just sort of see what would it look like, and
yeah,
I don't know, just to sort of I don't know if it really fits. So it doesn't seem to be like a natural fitting thing.
yeah. So you're taking the 30 years, just like we do with the life of Christ. We can take the 30 years and we can take when he's 12, right?
Mhm.
And when he's 30, and we can line them up and divide it to the different years. So the 12 lines up with 2001, because that's what you're talking about, how we normally take it as 12 years, right?
Yes.
So yeah, so we take it as 12 years from the time of the end to September 11th, and Jesus is 12 when he goes to the temple the first time for the Passover. So yeah, so in trying to take this up now, you're saying, well, it's really 11 years, 306 days, so we can take it as 11 years. And then you have to take the 13 years and kind of squish them, more like 12 years, right? And that's where you're not happy, is with those.
Yeah, I'm too much trying to make it fit, sort of thing,
Yeah, I understand.
Well, what I did find interesting is that we had marked there in 1989, 777 days to 1991.
Yeah.
1991 would then line up with Abram being 77.
Okay.
Okay,
So I thought that was quite interesting.
Yeah.
what marks 2013 and 14 again? Well, how does that line up with that?
Yeah, well, 2013 lines up with Abram.
Well,
being
what
99.
happened in 2013?
Well, that was Ezra 7:9 happened.
What happened again? What was that?
At the end of Habakkuk's two tables.
Oh, okay, I got you. Okay.
Ezra 7:9 began to be opened up.
Okay. All right. And then 14, what happened to 14 again?
Well, 2014 was really the beginning, the first kind of like major split in the movement.
Okay, I got you.
Um,
I'm familiar with the other ones. It's just those two.
yeah.
Okay.
And I think it was Parminder had predicted the Sunday law
Oh,
in
yeah.
2014.
Okay.
Yeah, that it would occur in 2014, but he predicted in 2012. But
Okay.
yeah, he predicted it for
Yeah.
2014. Now 2014 becomes a major waymark. And it is connected with the division that happens in the movement. But it's in 2013 that Ezra 7:9 is first examined. But it takes, and the person who examines it is one of the persons leading out in the division or the rebellion that happens in 2014. And that rebellion continues all the way to 2019. So there's the 5 years for the 5 foolish.
That started with Mark Bruce. Started with him, right?
Yeah, well, it didn't start with Mark Bruce. It started with Jamal Sankey, Emiliano, and
Okay.
Emiliano Richards, and
Okay.
others. Right. I think Jamal wrote the letter that in 2014 pitted them against Jeff.
Hmm.
But the 5 years there, I take as the 5 foolish.
Right.
But
Yeah, so it doesn't really, to me, it doesn't really kind of work.
yeah, I know what you're saying. So, but we do have the 30 years there, and that's all you're doing is you're taking the 30 years and saying, well, the 30 years parallel in some way. Maybe the division of it is wrong. Okay, well, thanks. That's really good. And so you're going to do this next Sunday as well.
I can do.
Okay. Okay. So this is part 1 of.
I don't know. Yeah, so I don't know if it could. It might not take that long. I don't know.
Oh, well, we'll make it take that long.
You just have a short one. Yeah.
No, we will do it because I'm going to be working on some of this too, and so some of the ideas that I have that come from this, because I'm working on some of these same ideas, so we'll see how they work.
Yeah,
And-
I could. Yeah, next week will be more about the chronology of the judges.
Yeah, the chronology of the judges and that'll take a bit of time. Yeah. Okay. So do you want to close with prayer then, Stephen?
I can do, yeah. Dear loving Heavenly Father, we give thanks for your grace and mercy towards us. And we give thanks for your many blessings. And as this new week, as studies take place in this here group, we pray that you open up more light to us and enable Theodore to present in a manner of the light of what has been opening up in the movement from 1989. Further reveal us to where we are in history and to have a deeper understanding of how you've led us. And we ask these things to your glory in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Amen.
My battery's running.